Hi there, and hello, and welcome, bienvenidos, to Harry Potter Abridged. And today on Harry Potter Abridged, we are continuing our we're like on it's like a luge or a bobsled. We are just through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. That's right. We are jetting through. Today we are on chapter numero 6. That is to say, number 6. I've just got 1 and like 1/100th of a language. Not even 100th, like 1,000th. Anyway, and chapter number 6 in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is entitled Talons and Tea Leaves. Excuse me. And this is a pretty significant chapter in the sense that there's just a lot of things that are set up for the rest of the story and a fair amount of foreshadowing. So there's a lot to pay attention to. So we'll try to highlight as much of that as we can. So it's the first day of school, first day of term back. They just arrived the previous evening where Harry had his where he passed out because of the Dementor, and we don't really know at this point in the story why that is or what's going on really. But everybody hated it, but it had an extra specially bad effect on Harry. And so it's the first day back, and so of course we have our first scene is in the Great Hall for breakfast. So we're really starting the day with them. And of course, as they entered the Great Hall, they passed the Slytherin table first, and Malfoy, because it's fucking Malfoy, is doing his best. And by best, I mean just most ridiculous impersonation of Harry passing out from the Dementor, and so he's just being Malfoy. And Hermione, of course, in classic Hermione fashion, is just like, ignore him, he's not worth it. So and yeah, they're just going on, and Pansy Parkinson gets in on the fun of the Slytherins over there, and so anyway, they make it over to the Gryffindor table, and they sit down next to George, who passes Harry his timetable, which generally involves McGonagall, but in this particular case, I guess they just have like the classes that they have, or maybe they were dropped off already. Maybe that's what anyway, so, and George is like, what's going on with you? And Ron's like, oh, it's fucking Malfoy, because, Malfoy. And George proceeds to tell Harry, like, that Malfoy himself was not very cocky or confident the previous evening when the Dementors were on their part of the train, and he actually came running into Fred and George's compartment. And that's one of the few times, actually, this is random, but just on my Fred and George watch, intermittently anyway, where George speaks first. I mean, granted, Harry sits down next to George, but I mean, obviously Fred's right there on the other side of him. So, anyway, and we get more mention from George first, and then Fred about the effect of the Dementors on everybody else, which it's like it tallies in the sense that they feel unhappy, they feel cold, feel frozen inside, all that stuff. And Harry's like, yeah, that's cool, but you didn't pass out. And George actually takes the lead in this conversation, and I have to admit, it's one of the first times that I've really noticed that, because Fred does usually seem to speak first, and George is sort of like there to like fill in the second sentence, and and on after that, because they do tend to go back and forth usually. But here, George comes in and talks about and just basically tries to like not console, almost sounds like patronizing. And I mean, George isn't like being that way at all. He's just like, dude, it's not a, don't worry about it. He's like, he mentions like he tells a little anecdote about Mr. Weasley visiting Azkaban one time and saying it was like the worst place he'd ever been. And that reminds me, so I did, I'm not going to pull it up right now, but I did some reading on Azkaban. It was started like years and years and years ago. Like, damn it, maybe I will pull it up at the end or something. But anyway, it was the last name of the person who was like the minister when it was opened was, I don't remember, but it was somebody that's like the last name of like a Death Eater or something like that. Like Roll, I think, maybe. Rowle, just in case my pronunciation didn't bear that out. Anyway, but the point is that this place. Before that, some like dark wizard had like built the fortress, and he did like a bunch of like dark experiments and types of just all kinds of shit there, and it was just like I don't know. Again, I should probably pull it up. Anyway, but then later, like the Dementors infested this place, and then the Ministry decided to use it as a place for their prison, because they'd had like apparently prior to that the Wizarding World had, or at least in England, they had smaller jails or prisons up and down the country, and so they decided to consolidate. Because the other thing was, apparently, if somebody broke out in a place that was like near a Muggle settlement or whatever, like then obviously there's a lot of shit to deal with, because there's going to be like bangs and lights and whatever else, what that they might see, that then there's like people, they have to go modify their memories, and there's just all this like, stuff to do. So again, this like more sinister minister, I was thinking there was something else too, like somebody who, I feel like some of these people were sort of like resentful about the statute of secrecy too, but I don't remember how that played into, I don't know if that played into the Azkaban. I just remember that being in the article. Anyway, and then like after that, like there were like the first two ministers that were like in charge after, as it was opened, like which supported it, and then after that, it's like the rest of them sort of just accepted it, even though it's obviously not a very, well, not at all a humane way to like deal with prisoners. I mean, somebody might be able to make an argument for like people who do like truly, truly, truly horrible things, but even then, I don't know. Torture is a whole, unless somebody tortured people, you know what I mean? But I mean, lots of opinions and gray areas and things that I don't really necessarily care to get too deeply into there. But the bottom line is that there are people who get sent there for crimes that definitely don't fit that punishment. But anyway, it's not until Kingsley Shacklebolt becomes the Minister of Magic after the events of the entire book series, that, I mean, of course the Dementors had already abandoned Voldemort anyway, but now they do it like, they still use Azkaban. There just aren't any Dementors there, so they have like a rotating guard, and apparently, according to Pottermore, there have been no escapes since the new system has been implemented. Which, generally makes sense. There aren't that many escapes in most prisons, if you take movies out of the picture. There were some more facts. I think I will pull it up later, maybe. But let's keep going with the chapter. I just wanted to kind of give you a little little Azkaban tangent. I still, by the way, I still wasn't. Not that this was specific, although some people made some comments about Dementors, and we'll get into the comments at the end too. But I wanted to find out like if there was an origin story for like how Dementors came to exist, and there wasn't, and I don't know. I know that a lot of the creatures that Rowling uses in this series are like, borrowed from various like fantasy realms and universes or whatever. But I don't think the Dementors fall into that category. I mean, they are like some other things in other fiction. They're like, well, I was going to get into this later, but fuck it. At least for now, I will just say that to me, they seem to be kind of a combination of the ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings and, shit, what was the other thing? Oh, God. Here we go. See, this is what happens. Gotta do a bunch of like clicking and shit. Yes. Well, I guess sort of like somebody, not somebody. Who was the somebody? Isaac. I hope that's how you say that. I'm not gonna attempt your last name. Forgive me. Said the theory: Dementors are just emo White Walkers, and there's an element. I guess you kind of get that from both the White Walkers and also the ring wraiths, that coldness factor, yeah. Anyway, and just like that impending doom. There's sort of like things that there's but they still sort of stand alone as their own thing, I think. Anyway, but yeah, I wasn't able to find any satisfactory information on exactly like how they came into the world or anything like that. If they were like some fucked up, demented, no pun apparently intended, like I don't know, some kind of like magical abomination that then was allowed to. I mean, then they also talk about them breeding. I don't understand that either. Like, are they gendered? Do they like pollinate? Like, what the fuck? I don't, I mean, I know mist is involved. That much I'm certain of. There's definitely mist involved. Cold mist that's dreary and seems to fit London like perfectly. But I mean, not that the place is dreary, but apparently it's pretty misty and all the time. So anyway, so yeah, George sort of tries to placate. Still doesn't seem like the right word, but just to comfort Harry, I guess is the best way to put it, by just reiterating how horrible Dementors are, and the thing about Mr. Weasley visiting Azkaban and how they suck out the happiness out of a place and how people go mad in there, which of course goes back to how inhumane and fucked up Azkaban is. And then Fred changes the subject to Quidditch because the first match is against Slytherin. So he's like, we'll see how Malfoy feels after all that. We're reminded that the last time, or the only other time that Malfoy and Harry have played each other in Quidditch, that Harry came off better for it. So anyway, that's kind of given Harry like a nice little like distracted, like better feeling, and so now he can eat breakfast. And so begins the mystery of what the hell is going on with Hermione in this book, which we of course learn later in the book. But because they're getting their timetables, and so Hermione's like, oh yeah, we're starting new subjects today, and Ron gets a look at her schedule, her timetable. We're going to use both of those words, schedules for the Americans, timetables for the Brits. And so Ron notices like right off the bat, like, and it's funny, there seems to be a well, not seems to be, there is like a large number of occasions where Hermione has something in her hand on paper, and Ron either snatches it up or manages to see what's on it before Hermione can hide it. Um, anyway, and he's like, "But you've got more classes than there are hours in the day today," and she's like, "I'll manage. I've got it all fixed with Professor McGonagall." And that's like her. It's amazing, actually, like when you really think about it, because this comes up like at least a handful of times, if not more than that, throughout the book. And it's like every time it comes up, Hermione is like able to sort of like brush it off and say things like, "I've got it all fixed with Professor McGonagall." Like that somehow just answers the thing that's implausible in real life. And so, but what happens is she'll continue to plant like other things adjacent to that occurrence of somebody noticing that she can't possibly have as many classes as she keeps referring to, and then something else happens so that the subject can be changed, while Hermione also brushes it off. Anyway, but here, like, this is the first time that it happens, so we really get like more of a detailed thing where Ron's like, "Wait a minute, 9 o'clock Muggle studies, 9 o'clock arithmancy, 9 o'clock divination. Wait a minute, what in the hell?" And he's like, "How are you supposed to be in 3 classes at once?" And of course she's like, "Don't be silly. I can't be in 3 classes at once." And she's like, "Yeah, pass the marmalade." And she repeats. So this is the first time it comes up. So again, there's more back and forth where she's able to sort of dismiss it more, like I said, later on, and then the subject manages to change. Anyway, and she's like, "Yeah, what's it to you if my timetable's a bit full?" And she repeats her excuse about having it fixed with Professor McGonagall. And then Hagrid comes in, and he's absent-mindedly swinging a dead polecat for whatever reason, because he's Hagrid and he's the gamekeeper, and he's a little absent-minded. Well, actually, right, he's nervous about something, right, of course. So that's why because he's fairly attentive to detail, otherwise he couldn't be the gamekeeper, but when he gets nervous or worried about something, he's extremely distractible and like just kind of forgets half of what he's doing while the worry like encompasses him. Let's just say Hagrid is prone to high levels of anxiety. And it's interesting because like he's like the kind of character that it wouldn't be weird necessarily, I don't think, anyway. I mean, obviously it would be now that we know Hagrid for who he is. I mean, and he is who he is. But for a character that has his build and his strength to just be like kind of easygoing all the time because he's sort of confident, because the confidence is sort of built into him, because he's sort of, I don't know. I mean, he could basically, there's nobody that can really hurt him for the most part in this world. Like, it's only at the very, very, very end of the story that anything happens to him that like makes him look diminished. And we won't obviously get into all that just now, but but the same token, like obviously he loses his father somewhat early on in life, fairly early on actually, because it's before he's expelled and then he's expelled. And so, like, there are things that sort of break his confidence, I guess. But it's like, it's a nice juxtaposition because you've got this character who could just sort of be content with his physical prowess over pretty much everyone, and sort of like have all the confidence in the world. But instead, he's like got these insecurities and like these issues that he deals with. And so anyway, right, Hagrid. So, oh, wait a minute. Well, yeah. Right. Sorry, I got confused for a minute because I forgot that they had been in the Great Hall once already, obviously for the feast the night before, right? So, anyway, so Hagrid's passing by the table, and he's like, he's nervous because he's got his first lessons that day is what he's nervous about. Not for a minute there, I was thinking that he was still needed to be announced as a teacher, and then I just remembered that was the previous chapter, and we already did that. Right, just the tangents took me away from where we were in the story for a moment there. So anyway, and so yeah, Hagrid's like, oh, me a teacher, honestly. It's kind of funny because, like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, Hagrid's not a great teacher. He's a great gamekeeper, and he's an even greater person. But, I mean, it's like he has it in him to be a great teacher, but again, because he's so like easily rattled and doesn't have a ton of self-confidence, it makes it really difficult to deal with like school age kids. I mean, especially when there's people like fucking Draco Malfoy in your school. So anyway, but I mean, you know, all the same, he's excited about it right now, and nervous but excited. So anyway, boop 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 boop. And Ron's like, oh, I wonder what the hell he's gonna do, because he's like, he's saying that he's been up all morning getting the first lesson ready. And so they head off to their first class, because this is their first time going to Professor Trelawney's classroom in North Tower for divination. So this is their first time going to that class. They're having to like figure out their way across that part of the castle. They're not quite to the point where they know everything about how to get around the castle yet. I do think that by the time they're done, the three of them pretty much do know it like the back of their hand, but it takes a little while because it is big. So anyway, that reminds me. If any of you, just talking about Hogwarts, we're doing what we're doing today. We always do it. If anybody's been to the place in Orlando, the theme park, it's the Harry Potter theme park. I can't remember the actual name of it. It has like a slightly like something. It's on the Islands of Adventure. Anyway, what I was wondering is the Hogwarts that you're able to visit, like how big is it, and how much, like how many places can you go inside once? I mean, I know that there's probably the Great Hall and the entrance hall obviously before that, and like a few other things, but I mean, are there like staircases, like the marble staircase? Is there like are there classrooms you can go into? Like is the common room there? Like what all the, like, or I say like there's only one, but the Gryffindor one, since that's the one we see. We never do see the Hufflepuff common room, do we? No. We get Slytherin once and Ravenclaw once. And obviously Gryffindor like dozens of times. But anyway, I'm just wondering like how much of this castle is built out that you can actually traverse when you go there. If anybody's been there, tell me about this in the comments. I would love to know. Anyway, and do they have like portraits with things moving and stuff? Like, do they have flat screens behind them? Do they do these kind? I mean, I need to know these things. Because they should. So anyway, it's a long hall, and they're walking, and they don't really know where they're going. I mean, they kind of know where they're going, but they're having to sort of like figure it out. On their way out, of course, they pass Malfoy, and he's doing another. He really likes to milk those things, and it's like you kind of like you realize that like Malfoy has like influential and wealthy parents, and so like you wonder how much of his Slytherin adoration is based off of that. Like, you know, that's pretty much why Crabbe and Goyle are like so subservient to him, because their parents are subservient to Lucius. Anyway, so you kind of wonder, like, how many of these people are like, I mean, I know some of them, like Pansy Parkinson obviously like kind of falls for Draco, if she hasn't already at this point. And so there's some people in that house obviously that do like him, but Slytherin's weird like that anyway. But I just wonder how much of his, like, people laughing at his like same joke over and over shit. I mean, I guess sometimes that's probably also just being a kid. Like things sometimes will stay funny longer than they might later in life. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, because Malfoy will. I mean, he will milk a joke to death. So they're off to the races. We get like one little one of those like Ron Hermione moments where like Hermione's like, for whatever reason, it's like a more practical thing, and so like Ron like gets the right answer, so to speak, because Hermione's like, I think it's this way, and Ron's like, no, that can't be, because that's south, and if you look out the window you can see the lake, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, oh, okay, human compass, cool. But it's like, it's the kind of thing that like Hermione could figure out. Obviously, it's not like it's that complicated, but it's just that like it's like sort of an interesting like spatial awareness kind of nod to Ron there. Anyway, but I think in a way it sort of highlights like the difference between like types of learning. Ron is well, he's just different. I don't know that I can analyze and say exactly what kind of learner he is right now. I'm not an educator, and I hadn't thought about this prior to this tangent, so we're going to leave it for now. But anyway, so while they're having that little side conversation about what direction is what, Harry's looking at this particular painting, which was empty. It just had like some grass or whatever. And then a pony comes in, and then shortly thereafter, a short, squat knight in a suit of armor comes in behind the pony, and it's Sir Cadogan. Cadogan will just he's a silly character. He almost reminds you of like a Monty Python version of a knight almost. He's very over the top. Not quite as silly as that, but just, you knaves, you dogs. Just lots of scurvy, braggart, rogue, all those kind of things. So anyway, he kind of like just starts off just brandishing his sword and like, just those things that I was just saying. And so finally they're like, hey, we're trying to get to North Tower. And he's like, a quest. And so, yes, a quest. And so then he actually does lead them where they're going while continuing to act ridiculous. So they run and they follow, because he runs through different pictures, because you can do that. And they have to climb the tower, and then he finally calls a farewell, and they're like, yeah, you're weird, whatever. And so they finally get up there, and they don't see any doors, and then they look up and see that there is how to describe, let's see. Yeah, there's a circular trap door, and it's got a plaque on it that says, Sybil Trelawney, divination, and then the trapdoor opens and a ladder comes down, and they have to climb a ladder. And I gotta say, the way this room is set up, with the I guess we're gonna get into how it's described right now. But my point is that the effect that this room has on a person doesn't really seem like having to climb down a ladder as you're leaving is like the safest thing in the world, because people just end up a lot of times like a little woozy because it's all anyway. So they come into the room, and it's like, it doesn't look like a classroom at all. It's like an attic tea shop, old-fashioned tea shop. There's like tables, like circular tables that are like surrounded by like chintz armchairs and poofs and all that, and so it's just very like loungy, and like there's a fire that's like burning like underneath a cauldron, and like there's like heavy perfumed heated scent, so it's just like very like, well, it's more like, instead of like seeming to be like a place where somebody does a lot of, or not a lot of, but does teaching, it seems more like a place where somebody performs, and that's sort of like the right way to see this, because as we will learn pretty quickly, Professor Trelawney, oh my God, Trelawney is definitely putting on an act, that's for sure. And you kind of almost sense that like she's been doing it for so long that she like half believes herself, you know? But by the same token, she totally has to know that she's using like some, I mean, they're the kind of techniques that like regular fortune tellers in the Muggle world, our real world, in other words, not the Muggle world of these books, but in our actual world, that people who claim to be mediums. I mean, who knows? Maybe such a thing does exist, but if it does, I feel like it's probably about as rare as the seers in this wizarding world are. But the average quote unquote fortune teller, I believe, is using techniques that basically are the same kind of thing that Trelawney does, that not too specific, you know, and then for the things like the thing that happens with Neville. Well, let's see. Hang on. Let me get it. Let me not get too. So we get a description of her. She is. Where is that? I'm actually looking at the wrong thing. Oh, but there she. So she comes in and she like enters the room with like a misty voice. I mean, like she's totally putting on from the get go. You know, and she's all like, "Oh, how nice to see you in the physical world at last." It's you know. Anyway, and so one of the first things we learn about her is that she's got these like big thick glasses, so her eyes look like 2 or 3 or 4 times bigger than they're supposed to. And I was just watching the segment of the movie to get the screenshot, and just to sort of like, again, like I'm trying to remember to watch it ahead of time so I can compare. It's weird because even though Professor Trelawney in the book is very over the top, like in retrospect, even though I think they got the look pretty much right in the movie, I feel like she's too over the top. I never thought that before, but like by, you know, when I'm comparing them next to each other, like I feel like they maybe it's because I'm spoiled by Stephen Fry's acting abilities and his ability to do like better voices than most of the cast of the movie. But it's like the way he does Trelawney and the way she comes across to me from the words that are actually in the book. Because they totally like reassigned a lot of the lines to like students too. She doesn't even say them all herself. But they just, I don't know. You kind of like got the sense that like, I mean, and I know that what's her name, Emma Thompson. I think that's right. Or am I getting? That's not Hermione, is it? No, that's Watson. Yeah, Thompson. Yeah, that's right. I got it right. I think. Anyway, you kind of get the sense that like, because she wasn't going to be in a lot of scenes, that like she didn't really embrace like the character like truly, and so she was like, "Oh, I'm just supposed to be kind of hokey, huh?" And they were like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, do that," and like that was what she did, and so like it just sort of worked. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Like I'm watching the movie in segments too, so I'm not even allowing myself to get as immersed as I might have been if I just sat down and watched it all from beginning to end. But whatever, we're breaking shit down here. That's what we do. So anyway, I thought it was really like, even for Trelawney, I thought it was too over the top. That's just me. I don't know. I'm curious to see what anybody else thinks. But But again, I thought that the look was pretty right. I mean, she definitely had like the fortune teller look and the big glasses and the magnified eyes and all that stuff. Because Harry sees her and thinks of a giant insect or a large insect or whatever. And she's of course got like a bunch of shawls and like chains and beads and bangles and stuff and So yeah, she introduces herself and the subject, and she talks about the inner eye and how she doesn't normally descend into the school very much because it clouds her inner eye, and so she lays it on pretty heavy. I mean, she's like definitely like selling her abilities up front. Like that's like her plan to make this class as successful as possible for her is to convince everybody early on that she actually has some kind of power. And then by doing that, like she expects that will gain her a certain level of respect from the students, and then she can proceed to teach however she has to teach for the rest of the term. And of course, she goes so far as to be like, "I must warn you that some of you will not have the sight, and there's very little I can teach you." And of course, we get the introduction of Hermione's eventual departure from this class by when Professor Trelawney says, "Books can only take you so far in this field," and Hermione looks kind of startled at first, but then like before much longer, she goes from startled to like completely skeptical, which to me is quite logical. But Hermione's a step or two ahead most of the people in her class, intelligence-wise. So things like this are gonna not get by her, and that mirrors how McGonagall feels about it. And I always feel like there are, as far as adult characters that are like, or child characters that are like adult characters, Hermione and McGonagall obviously have a lot in common. I mean, there's things that they don't, but then again, we don't even know what Minerva McGonagall, the third year at Hogwarts, was like. Who knows? Maybe they're more alike than we think. It wouldn't surprise me. Because apparently there was like this whole backstory of McGonagall that was written, but obviously Rowling never had a reason to use it, and I think she had like a big tragedy or heartbreak or something. So there's something that like changed her into who she is as a woman versus who she might have been as a girl and a young woman. But anyway, and so then, not terribly kindly, well, I mean, not unkindly, I don't guess, but unfortunately enough, anyway, Trelawney recognizes Neville's blundering nature somehow early on. You can just see something from his appearance, and decides to use him as a way to demonstrate her abilities by saying, well, first and this is really the least cool part of it. She's like, she's like, "Is your grandmother well?" And he's like, I think so. And she's like, "I wouldn't be so sure if I were you." I'm like, that's fucked up. That's the only adult family member he's got. You don't know shit about his grandmother except that she exists because you've been here so long. It's just, yeah, that's like Neville gets a lot of shit, man. Like it's just, I understand that, like, unfortunately, certain types of people tend to be targets, and it's just shitty. But man, anyway, and so Neville, of course, is kind of terrified by that, and so by setting him up with that first to create like to create like a sense of like uncertainty with him, and like to sort of like destabilize him as somebody who's already not the most confident kid in the classroom, in fact probably the least confident kid in the classroom, to then hit him with that and then be like, well, she says some stupid shit to Parvati about beware a red-haired man, which is kind of funny because isn't it, Oh no, Parvati goes with Harry to the Yule Ball. It's Padma that goes with Ron, so that's just doesn't even make sense. But anyway, at the moment, Parvati is like, looking at Ron like, oh shit, and like gets away from him. But so anyway, she continues to kind of like describe like how the term is going to go, like, and then we're going to go to the crystal ball, and if we finish, and then she says if we finish fire almonds. Of course she shouldn't have to say if she really knows everything so well, but whatever. Then she's like, unfortunately classes will be disrupted in February, nasty bout of flu, I will lose my voice. Well, obviously I don't remember if anything like that happens later in the story or not, but of course, her faking sick wouldn't be hard. I mean, she's kind of like really good at the faking in general. So, and then she does say that around Easter, one of our number will leave us forever, which is a vague pronouncement too. But she's convinced that somebody will drop the class, and she may or may not have picked up on Hermione being that person. But I kind of doubt it just yet. Probably won't be too long though. But anyway, but the point is that she says that like around the time that I think is maybe, well, I don't remember. Well, Easter is a holiday, but that's not the end. Is that the end of a term? I don't. It might be. So anyway, so then she moves to like what's going to be the exercise for this lesson, which is reading tea leaves, and so she gets a teapot from, like, she gets Lavender to pass it to her, and then so they all have to get up and get teacups, and so this is when she uses the setup that she did with Neville by like warning him about his grandmother unnecessarily, and she's like, after you've broken your first cup, would you please be so kind to select one of the blue patterned ones. And so I got like a couple problems with this, because first of all, is she a witch or not? If Neville breaks a cup, even if Neville's not prepared to reparo it, pretty much everybody else in the fucking room can. And then especially Trelawney, right? I mean, like, she might not be a seer, but she is a witch. She clearly graduated, well, not clearly, but most likely did graduate Hogwarts and has a wand. Granted, I don't think we ever see her pull her wand out, but I know she's not a squib. At least I can't imagine. No. We do see her like doing some shit in the seventh book with like crystal balls, like throwing, like using her wand to like lob them at the Death Eaters or something, to like try and like knock them out or something like that, I think. Yeah. Anyway. So anyway, so yeah, they get their tea and they are given instructions and they have to like do the thing. But anyway, so she does that little prank with Neville. The other thing that I have a problem with is, again, like I said, she or anybody else in there should be able to repair any broken china. So like the whole gimmick is kind of stupid to begin with. But then second of all, like, you kind of wonder, like, did Neville break it because he kind of like had it in his mind that he was going to? Probably, but it's also possible that if she's got a bunch of like shawls and stuff, like and she could have like surreptitiously broken the glass with her wand. I mean the cup, to sort of like create not even self-fulfilling prophecy, but just like, well, yeah, self-fulfilling. Has she fulfilled it herself and nobody knew? I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that's another possibility there. So the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. But so anyway, but of course, again, it does happen, and she actually brings over a dustpan and a brush. So in my mind, like, she knows that she could repair it, and maybe she's going to after the class is over. Like, I don't know, but she totally plays up the fact that he broke it exactly how she predicted, air quotes, that it would happen. So anyway, then they look at Harry and Ron do the thing with their tea, and they're their cups, and then they look at each other's tea leaves. And they totally like in the movie they totally switched this dialogue around where like Harry's the stuff that Harry says to Ron says to Harry, and then after that, the part it kind of picks back up what's happening in the book. But anyway, so Harry's like reading like conflicting signs in Ron's leaves that say like he's gonna have like trials and suffering, but then there's something else that he's like, oh, but this means you're gonna have great happiness. So you're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it. And I don't really understand. This is weird. They're supposed to be paired up, but we never figure out who Hermione's sitting with. It's almost like she's disappearing in the middle of the class and coming back, which wouldn't make sense because even with what we know that later that she is doing, she should be there through the entirety of a class. But it does kind of like make it feel like that because they like, or she, I mean to say, Rowling focuses on Harry and Ron's interaction here for a minute because they're paired up, and so then they switch, and so Ron's looking at Harry's, and it's a bunch of silly stuff, but then he's like, and there's even a mention of something that might be a windfall, unexpected gold, and he's like, excellent, you could loan me some, which is kind of funny because like generally what we know about Ron suggests that he wouldn't actually take a loan from Harry, but maybe in the context of it being like something like a true wind, like something that would make Harry like the equivalent of like a multi-millionaire, then he's like, well shit, and the fact that it would be like probably in Ron's mind like just some like lottery type, like not anyway, whatever. It's just funny that Ron makes the joke. That was my whole point. There's not really a whole lot to go to there. Just that there's always something about Ron not having money is my point. And then Ron sees something that does look kind of like an animal. And he's like, a hippo, and then no, a sheep, which I'm like, damn, Ron, really? Hippo or sheep? Very similar looking, those. Wait, no. And so Trelawney springs into action as she hears that Harry has an animal in his cup, and she grabs the cup from Ron, and then of course everybody goes quiet because she's being very dramatic, and then she starts reading it, but what she does is instead of just going straight to the thing that Ron had just seen, like she recognized it, but then she plays it up. She like makes a series of things. And so she's like, the Falcon, you have a deadly enemy. And now Hermione's like back in the picture, and she's like, but everybody knows that. And it's funny because Trelawney totally like looks at her like, bitch, you're interrupting my goddamn act here. You need to like just lay low. And she's like, but they do. And she's like, everybody knows about Harry and you know who. And it's like, well, again, Hermione's just so logic driven and like doesn't really get distracted too easily most of the time. So she can't help it. She's just like, well, duh. Like what the hell are you saying? So, and of course, Harry and Ron are both like, whoa, he's never talked to a teacher like that before. And so Trelawney continues, and she's mentioned something, the club, an attack. And Ron's like, I thought that was a bowler hat. And there's the skull, danger in your path. Like all this just like, it's like just a big bad like tarot reading or something. Which Trelawney is totally seen walking around with tarot cards later. Oh, and then so after she sees the skull, she's continuing to look at the cup, and then she gives like a a gasp, and she screams. Like, I mean, she really goes like all the way out. Like, I mean, you got to give her an A for effort on in terms of her theatricality. That's not a word, is it? I like it though. And of course, Neville smashes his second cup just to like drive everything home because she screamed, and that is legit. Not the screaming, but the Neville being startled by it because he's already on edge right now. Poor Neville. Anyway, and she even like instead of just like saying it out loud like right away, she's like, "My dear boy." Oh, it's kinder not to say. No, I won't. She like totally does the whole like, oh, don't ask me thing. And then, of course, Dean Thomas speaks up and actually asks. And she's like, you have the Grrrim. And of course, like at least half the class, including Harry, are like, huh? The who? But some people are totally like, Ron being one of them. And so she explains that the Grrrim is a giant spectral dog that haunts churchyards, and it is an omen of death. So, of course, the problem is Harry's been like pretty skeptical of her, relatively speaking. Of course, this is his first class, so he hasn't had time to build up his skepticism. But he, she seemed pretty, whatever up to this point. But now he's like, oh, shit. Because he saw that dog in Magnolia Crescent right after he left the Dursleys. Then he saw the dog on the cover of the book at Flourish and Blots. And he's just kind of like, okay. Great. Cool. And while Harry's in the middle of, feeling like, oh, fuck, Hermione's like, I don't think it looks like a Grrrim. Which is great because, Hermione's like, back to life, back to reality. And of course, the only way that Trelawney can, like, readily combat this logic is to discredit Hermione. Because she can see right now that Hermione's one of the students that's going to see through her act early on before she's even had a chance to like establish herself fully. Although she's done a pretty good job on like some of the class already. But anyway, so she's like, I perceive little aura around you, very little receptivity to the resonances of the future. Stuff like that. So actually, I should have played Trelawney. Not. And then Seamus Finnegan like actually manages to like inject a little bit more sanity into the thing, because he's like, well, if it looks like a Grrrim if you do like this, and he's like all like squinting and like turning his head and shit, and he's like, but it looks more like a donkey. I cannot do that accent. And I also feel like even if I just try, like somebody's gonna like come punch me just because I tried. Meanwhile, Harry's like, well, that's great. If everybody could let me know when they figure out if I'm gonna die or not, that'd be real fucking cool. And everybody's like, and so now everybody who was staring at him can't seem to look at him anymore. And so it's like, and so Trelawney, of like in dramatic fashion, knows like to leave them wanting more. She's like, I think we'll leave the lesson there for today. So she sends them away, which is actually early, and it's for once something that seems like it didn't take that long is sort of proven to, because it says that even though they left divination early, they had to go so far to get to transfiguration that they were there just in time. Anyway, and so Harry's like, still feeling like kind of fucked up about this whole like Grrrim thing, because nobody else knows except for him that he's seen this sign elsewhere, and not just on the book, but an actual fucking black dog. And And so Harry sits in the back and like is trying to kind of hide, but everybody keeps like shooting looks at him because they're all like, you know, thinking he's gonna die and shit. Like it's kind of crazy that everybody's. But I mean, you know, they're again, she does a fairly good act, and they're young and they don't know yet how other people feel about divination either. So there's some things to learn, and some of that's about to happen right now. And so another foreshadowing moment, we have McGonagall introducing them into human transformation, and she explains what animagi are, and that they are wizards who can transform into animals. And Harry's so distracted, he doesn't even see her transform into her tabby cat self and then back. And so McGonagall, after she does that, like nobody does anything. And she's like, I mean, you know, not that it really matters, but usually I get applause for that little bit of hocus pocus. She doesn't say that. And everybody's like still looking at Harry, but they're not saying anything. And so Hermione's like, see, McGonagall, what had happened was, as we had just had our first divination lesson, and we did the tea leaves, and McGonagall's like, oh, girl, shit, you ain't even got to say nothing else, girl. I already know what you're talking about. So, anyway, McGonagall then goes on to explain that good Lord, in every first divination lesson that Trelawney ever has, she predicts a student's death, and that none of them have died so far. And of course, like picking Harry is just like such a shitty thing to do. It's just like telling Neville that his grandmother might be, you know, ill or not well or whatever. Because, I mean, like, everybody knows about Harry and Voldemort. Everybody knows that Harry's already had to face Voldemort. Everybody knows that there's probably nobody that's in any more danger inside of all of fucking Hogwarts than Harry fucking Potter. So she picks him, of course. It's just like, ugh. Anyway. The one thing that I know this is, well, I guess the answer probably is just scheduling, but it makes me feel like when McGonagall says that this her first, you know, animagus transformation this is the first time it's never gotten applause. I'm like, if it's the first day of term, that means it's always the first day of divination too. And you mean to tell me that you've never had any third years come into your class right after divination? Or is it because prior to that, nobody really believed that one of their classmates might actually die, but because it's Harry, they're like more skeptical because he's already like had brushes with death, and I don't know. Anyway, whatever. And so then, so McGonagall's like basically like, yeah, that shit ain't shit. You know, I ain't gonna talk about my colleagues like that, but that shit ain't shit. I don't. Divination is imprecise. It's not. Basically, she, without saying it, she's like, it's some bullshit. And so, and she even says, where is it? Let's see. She says, first of all, she says, I have very little patience with it. And she's like, true seers are very rare. And she's like, and Professor Trelawney. So you know right there that she thinks that she's a fraud. Like, pretty much without having to say it all, she said it. And of course, you know, as if you're a first-time reader, which you're probably not if you're listening to this, but as you may have remembered from your first time reading it, you might have been thinking around this time, like, well, shit. Aside from being like a bit of almost comic relief in the story, why in the hell does Dumbledore employ her? Why is she at the school? And I mean, that's an important question because it is answered, but not in this book. Well, no, not truly. No. There's a reference to the reason why, but it's not given in this book. And so anyway, yeah, there is a reason, but it has like shit to do with divination or her teaching abilities. So yeah. Anyway, so McGonagall's like, yeah, Harry, you look good to me. If you die, I promise you won't have to turn in your homework. And so Hermione, of course, laughs, and it seems like not everybody else really does, but Harry feels better because, first of all, they're not in that fucking like smoky, like trancy kind of room, and also McGonagall's like such a reliable, like good head on her shoulders kind of person. If she's not with it, then yeah, it's easier to not get caught up in it. But of course, Lavender's like, but what about Neville's cup? Which indicates that a large number of the class is still like skeptical because they're like, but she did predict that right in front of us. Which, I mean, speaks to like how people are about that kind of thing in general. There are some people who want to believe that kind of stuff. I can't even really blame them for wanting to, but going so far as to actually, I don't know, whatever. So let's see. Oh, but so they head off to lunch, and Ron is still like actually like caught up in this shit because well, we're about to see why. And so Ron's like, well, so Harry, you haven't actually seen a great big black dog anywhere. And Harry's like, well, yeah, I did. Yep, that happened the night I left the Dursleys. And Ron's like, and Hermione's like, it was a stray. And so, like, again, we get like the conflict of like logic versus like magical world shit. In this case, magical world superstition, as it turns out. But Ron also has a different reason. It's not just the superstition that is prevalent in the wizarding world about Grimms. But Ron says that his uncle Bilius did see a Grrrim and died 24 hours later. Never mind that Harry's been alive for like 3.5 weeks or some shit since he saw that Grrrim. So, whatever about logic. But Hermione's like, it was a coincidence. And Ron's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Blah, blah, blah. But it again, it goes back to like this, like, the myth versus the logic. He's like, Grimm's scared the daylights out of most wizards, and Hermione's like, well, there it is. The Grimm's the cause of death, not an omen. And she's like, and that's why Harry's still with us, because he's not going to just see a death omen and just like off himself, or whatever the fuck pop my clogs means. I guess that I don't. Does that doesn't mean like, does that like mean blow your head off? Like, what does that mean? Jorge, we need you. Or Sarah, or any of my other Brits. But Ron's just like blah blah blah, and Hermione's still like on this. I mean, from the beginning, she's already like skeptical. She's like, this divination seems very woolly. Which is another word we would totally not use, but that sounds perfect nonetheless. She's like, it seems like a lot of guesswork to me. And Ron's now like being so stuck, because Ron does this. He gets stubborn about something, and then he like loses sight of his own logic, and he's like, well, there was nothing woolly about that Grrrim. And she's like, you called it a sheep. And so Ron just like doubles down again. He's like, well, Trelawney said you didn't have the right aura. You just don't like being rubbish at something. And of course, even though Hermione's like 100% right about everything in this situation, the fact that Ron said that to her like totally still strikes a nerve, because she does. Hermione, I mean, and this year especially sort of like exemplifies that. I mean, she's like taking a ridiculous number of classes. She wants to be the top of the class. She wants to be the smartest witch in the building, especially because she's Muggle-born, and so I think maybe she has like a wanting to prove herself kind of thing. And then she's just already like super intelligent, and she like wants to like go with that and take it to the max. So even about a subject that she's skeptical of and doesn't think much of, for Ron to like say that she's going to be bad at it, it just touches a nerve. And she's like, well, if being good at that means I have to pretend to see death omens, I'm not sure I'll be studying it much longer. So even though there is obviously the hint that she's probably not going to stick with it because it's bullshit, she's still like upset. But I guess you could also say that she's upset because Ron's just being an ass right now. So anyway, she like grabs her shit and leaves, and Ron's just like, well, oh, and as she's leaving, she's like, she mentions, she's like, but she says that lesson was absolute rubbish compared to my arithmancy class, and then she stalks away, and Ron's like, wait, she hasn't been to an arithmancy class yet, because they've only had 2 classes before lunch, I think. The divination and then transfiguration, at least as far as we can tell, anyway. So again, we have a mention of Hermione's unusual schedule. In this case, she's not even around to respond, so it doesn't go any further than that. So then they head off to their first ever Care of Magical Creatures lesson, which now sort of like switches the subjects to other things, and we get to like see a bit about Hagrid and his, well, a few things. But let's go. Let's just keep going here. So, of course, Ron and Hermione aren't speaking to each other right now because this is another theme. And so Harry's like walking in between them and just like, not saying anything because he doesn't just really, it's kind of like a shitty situation to be in. And then they get down there and they see fucking Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, and they realize that this is a class they're going to be taking with Slytherin, and it's like, of course it is, because this will create the most potential disruption. And this is the only other class they take with Slytherin. They take potions with Slytherin, and they take Care of Magical Creatures with Slytherin. It doesn't seem like, it's weird how that happens, I guess. Like, I hadn't really, like, analyzed it too much before, but there's only certain classes that they seem to take with other houses. Like, Transfiguration, I'm almost positive, is just Gryffindor. And until, like after OWLs, the same thing, I think, applies to Defense Against the Dark Arts, where it's just Gryffindor. They take Herbology with the Hufflepuffs. I don't think they have any classes with Ravenclaw. And that's it, I think, right? Like they don't... Flitwick seems like it's always just Gryffindor for charms. Same thing for Binns for History of Magic. I don't remember ever hearing about any of the other students in there either. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. It's kind of interesting. Like what makes potions and Care of Magical Creatures and Herbology, like, are the classrooms just bigger? Is it a subject that's easier to teach to a larger number of students? I don't know. These are just things. And so that's another thing. I might have, if I thought of it, said it at the beginning of the episode, but I do like, and I'm going to continue to like look things up and like, reread or listen to or both the chapters before I do the episodes to give as much of my insight and analysis as possible. But like, I don't really like aim to have all the answers, like the interaction with the comments and like just like general like that kind of discussion is something that I enjoy about this. And like, I want to hear what you guys have to say, or, if you look something up that I didn't, or you find, about something that I don't, or whatever, like that's part of this. And like I said, I'm not necessarily letting myself off the hook for like trying to get a fair amount of information, but and there's things, so many of these questions that happen too come up while I'm doing the episode, because I don't write this out or anything, as you probably have guessed. This is all like just straight through, off the top of my head, whatever comes out, and that's why I prepare by rereading the chapter, so at least I already know what we're going to basically talk about. But I don't like a lot of the individual little questions just pop up as I'm skimming through again. And that's why there's just no way I'm going to have all the answers, and I'm not going to look all of them up while we're doing the episode. So yeah, just a side note about that. Like I like to hear from you. It's your comments are nice. You guys help explain things, and you also have other opinions because you've been exposed to this material, and some of you many times just like me, and have formed your own thoughts and theories and whatever, and that's part of what makes this cool. So anyway, so Hagrid's waiting for them, and they all head on down, and he's like, come on now, great lesson coming up. And so, like, he starts the lesson, he starts the beginning of everything here, like Hagrid does, seeming fairly excited and confident. But, of course, Malfoy is just a shit, and he doesn't like Hagrid, and he sees Hagrid as less than human. He sees him more like a servant because he's not a qualified wizard, because he's half giant, even though they don't know technically that he's half giant, but he seems he's just different, because he's so big too. He kind of like, some people see him as blundering, even though he only really blunders when he's nervous. That's the ironic part. Anyway, so for a minute they think they're going to the forest, but they're not. They walk around the forest, and they come to a fenced-in paddock area, and so Hagrid asks them to take out and open their books, and of course Malfoy's like, how? Because the monster book bites, and nobody has any idea how to open it. So of course, Hagrid's like, oh, you just got to stroke him. That was totally the wrong voice. God damn it. What the hell was that? I don't know. Anyway, but Hagrid's like kind of crestfallen right now because he's like, nobody's been able to open their books? Shit. Oh, look, there's the word crestfallen. I said it before I saw it. How about it? So yeah, Hagrid explains that they've got to stroke them, and so he shows them. He takes Hermione's and runs his hand down the spine, and of course then the book just lays open and doesn't try to bite anymore. And so of course Malfoy's all like, oh, how silly we've all been. You got to stroke them. But this, of course, goes back to what I said in the earlier chapter when they were buying the fucking books. Like, why would the manufacturer of the books not send a note or word to the shop owner that this is how you calm these books down? This is how you get them to not attack each other or attack anything. Like that. Anyway. So yeah, and Hagrid's like, I thought they were funny. And Malfoy's like, yes, tremendously funny. So it just, he's just giving him shit. And so Harry's like, shut up, Malfoy. And in the book, this is the book. In the movie, they make it a little bit more like Hagrid's walked off to go get what's coming, and Harry's like, shut up, Malfoy, and Malfoy steps up to him, and everybody's like, ooh, and it's all very like grade school, middle school feeling. But anyway, nothing really. Hermione's grabs Harry and is there, and she gives him Malfoy a eat shit look, and that's kind of that. But it's just it's, I don't know, it's kind of stupid. Anyway, so of course Hagrid was supposed to start his lesson by getting them to open their books to a certain page or whatever, and maybe read about hippogriffs, which are what are coming. And that totally gets derailed. So now he's like, oh, well, you got your books, so let me get you the magical creatures. Like, he's just completely already derailed. And so Malfoy, like, then is going on about Hagrid. Oh, this is the part that's in the movie, actually. Yeah, he's like, this place is going to the dogs. And he can't resist the chance to call Hagrid an oaf and my father and all that good shit. So Harry's again like, shut up, Malfoy. And that's, yeah, and Malfoy's like, careful, there's a Dementor behind you. Ooh. In the movie, actually, now that I think about it, Malfoy actually like pulls it off a little bit differently. Like, he actually like pulls like kind of a scared face and like jumps, and like, so it causes Harry to jump, but it causes like a bunch of people to jump. It's not just Harry. And then he says like, oh, a Dementor, ooh, and then like another foreshadowing element happens actually in the movie where like Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle like pull up their hoods mimicking Dementors, which becomes relevant later. Anyway, and so yeah, so there are hippogriffs, and in the book there are 12. In the movie there is 1. Because they have to be completely CG, and this was like 10 years ago or some shit. So it's, or longer. I forget. But anyway, they weren't fitting to have. I'm surprised they didn't like try to do like 3 or something though. But whatever. So hippogriffs are described to us. They have the bodies and back legs of horses and tails too, but their front legs and their wings and their heads are like giant eagles, maybe a la Lord of the Rings style eagles, but they have different colors that like. It's kind of cool because their color schemes seem to match like various horses, but then that same color scheme is applied to their plumage because they have like. Their heads literally start as feathers, and then it like smoothly transitions to like fur in their body, and so like they're much like how the centaurs are, except that they're not human part in the front. They're eagle part. Anyway, and they have like big ass foot long talons and big legs, and they're just they're like beautiful and scary, but. This is Hagrid's first fucking lesson, and of course Hagrid wants to like wow everybody and be seen as like the guy who can like handle the big creatures, but he also wants to show you that the big creatures don't have to be scary. So anyway, so Hagrid's got like every single one of them is collared. There's like a dozen of them, and Hagrid by himself to remind you how big he's supposed to actually be. Is got like all 12 chains in like one hand, like pulling them on, and yeah. So, and he's like, he's not scared at all. Like he's like, gee up, come on, and like pulling them up, and so he explains to them that they're hippogriffs, and he's like, they're beautiful, aren't they? Almost Hagrid voice. So, so of course Harry, Ron, and Hermione volunteer to come closer, and then, and so Hagrid actually gets back into the crux of his lesson, because the first thing he tells them is the most important thing you need to know about a hippogriff if you're going to get anywhere near one, and that is that they're proud and easily offended. He says, don't never, that's right, Hagrid double negatives them, insult one, because it might be the last thing you do. And of course, would then, camera flash over to Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle not paying attention when Hagrid's telling them the most important thing about hippogriffs. And they're talking, and Harry's like assuming that they're trying to find a way to disrupt the lesson. I saw somebody suggest that what happens to Malfoy in a minute was a planned thing. I don't think so. There's a reason why she writes in that little short paragraph about how they're not paying attention, because they're not hearing the crucial information. Anyway, so Hagrid's continuing to explain, like, you wait for them to make the first move. You know, like, basically, like, they're like these manners-based animals. So it's explained what you do. You walk up to them, you bow, you wait. If they bow back, then they're like telling you that it's okay to come pet them. If they don't, you back up. And for some reason, the line in the movie there was like, instead of like, you know, get away quick or whatever, he just says, he says like, and if not, well, we'll get to that in a minute. And I'm like, you wouldn't wait to get to that. You would tell them that if it doesn't work, if the hippogriff doesn't bow, back the fuck up. Like, you don't leave that for later, because later might be too fucking late if that happens fast. Anyway, whatever. So Hagrid's looking for a volunteer to come, you know, do the hippogriff introduction thingy, and nobody wants to volunteer, of course. And so Harry's like, fine, I'll do it. So Harry's like, good man, Harry. And so we meet Buckbeak. And of course, it's just Buckbeak in the movie, as I said. Anyway, so Hagrid pulls this one away from the group, and I'm trying to remember, does it tell us what color Buckbeak is? I feel like it does. Anyway, well, whatever, maybe not. Anyway, so Harry does the thing. He, like, you know, comes in closer, and then, like, and Hagrid's like, don't blink, and Harry's like, oh, fuck, here we go. And so then Harry does the bow. We do see that Buckbeak has orange eyes. So Harry does the bow, as I say, and then for a minute there, Buckbeak doesn't do anything, and Hagrid's like, back away now. Easy does it. And then Buckbeak does bow. And so Hagrid's like, all right, you can touch him now. And this was actually like in the book, it was kind of good because like it says here that, you know, Harry thought it would have been a better reward would have been able to like be able to walk away now that I don't have to, you know, I got past this other part. But when Hagrid says basically the same line to him in the book, he kind of looked at Hagrid like, really? Like now I have to like go forward and touch the damn thing? But anyway, so he does, and he pats him on the beak, and you know, Buckbeak is actually like very chill now and like closes his eyes, even though I don't understand how you could feel anything on a beak, which is not alive any more than a horn or hair is, but whatever. Is it? It's not, right? It's the same kind of thing. Anyway, whatever. Buckbeak likes it, and so everybody claps, and so, of course, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle are looking disappointed because Harry didn't get hurt. And then Hagrid's like, well, I reckon he might let you ride him. And Harry's like, okay, listen, what the fuck, man? So anyway, and in the movie, Hagrid just like picks him up and puts him on Buckbeak. Here, he actually like is like, okay, fine, Hagrid, I'll go along with your shit, basically, and climbs up on Buckbeak's back. And of course, the in here we have him. Buckbeak takes off, and Harry's like, oh, this shit sucks. We get a comparison to flying on a broom, which of course he much prefers. And here it just says that Buckbeak flew him once around the paddock and then headed back to the ground. But apparently the script must have said Buckbeak flies Harry all over Hogwarts, then skims along the lake, then takes way back off into the sky again, and then comes down around the paddock and then lands. And like there's There's a scene like the part where he's like flying over the water and like he like suddenly has like more confidence because like Buckbeak is like gliding, and so he like lifts his arms like on some "I'm the king of the world" shit, and like he's like woo and all that. Oh, every time there's a chance for Harry to be riding on something, the movie always takes it to the extremes, or for Harry to be chased by something in the air, like the dragon in the next movie. But anyway, right. So then everybody's like, oh well, if Harry can do all that, then we can at least do the bowing and the petting and all that good shit. So everybody comes into the paddock, and of course, as it turns out, Ron and Hermione go to a different hippogriff, and Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle go over to Buckbeak. And Malfoy's already done like the basic introduction, and he's petting Buckbeak, and then he's like, "I bet you're not dangerous at all, are you? You ugly great brute!" And then, and Malfoy's on the ground. He got a talon to the arm. And he's all like, I'm dying. Look at me. It's killed me. And I don't know. I could see why, because he's putting on a little bit more of an act. Or maybe he's not. Like, I think Malfoy's just a wimp when it comes down to it. That's how I've always read this part of the chapter. Because I don't really think that he got attacked on purpose. I don't think he could have predicted the severity of an attack enough to like feel comfortable doing that just as a way to disrupt the class. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just the way I feel about it. Now once it happens, he totally milks it for all it's worth. But my opinion is that there's a reason why she told us that Malfoy wasn't listening when Hagrid was giving them the important information about not insulting hippogriffs. So, yeah, I think he just thought he could say that shit because he's like, oh, this is so easy. Oh. So, yeah, but once he does get attacked, he's like, oh, I'm dying. It's killed me. And I can't decide if he's now playing it up because he knows it'll cause more problems, or if because he's hurt and he's a fucking wimp. Either, in my opinion, are completely plausible in this scenario. So Hagrid grabs Malfoy and carries him out, and obviously that's the end of that class. So things go poorly for Hagrid's first class, which, you know, it seems like how it almost had to be, just because of to just create more tension. So everybody like follows Hagrid back to the castle, and of course the Slytherins are like, screaming for Hagrid's like immediate firing or whatever. And Dean Thomas is like, it was Malfoy's fault, which is good that it's not always just Harry, Ron, and Hermione standing up for Hagrid. And Pansy Parkinson's all like, I'm going to see if he's okay. Because of course she is. And so they go back up to Gryffindor Tower, and Hermione's all like, do you think he'll be all right? And of course they're like, well, of course he'll be all right. Madame Pomfrey can handle a cut. It's not a big deal. But Ron is like, well, it was a pretty shitty thing to have happen in the first class. So they go to dinner, and Hagrid's not in the Great Hall because, of course, he's not. He's sad, and nervous, and, I wonder how many other classes he had that day. Did other people's Care of Magical Creatures class get canceled, or was that his last one of the day and their first with him? Because, obviously after that incident, I can't imagine him being okay with teaching the rest of that day. And they're worried that he might get sacked, and Ron's like, they better not. And Harry sees a bunch of Slytherins over at their table, like, huddled together, like, and what he imagines is them, like, kind of, like, concocting their own version of how the situation went down with Malfoy getting hurt, which is probably true. And Ron's like, well, you can't say it wasn't an interesting first day back, which is very true, because this whole chapter is just like that one day. So after dinner, they go back to the common room, but they're trying to do their homework, but they can't focus because they're worried about Hagrid, and they're like, Harry's like, well, there's a light on down there, and Ron's like, well, it's technically not too late to go out. Let's go. And Hermione's like, I don't know. And Harry's like, I can walk across the fucking grounds. There's Dementors at the entrances, right? Sirius Black hasn't gotten past them, right? I can walk to Hagrid's hut. And so they do. So they put their shit away and they go down to Hagrid's hut. And no invisibility cloak. They're like not expecting to be in trouble. So they're just walking down there. So Hagrid actually lets them in. Sometimes when he's really distraught, he doesn't even answer his door, but he invites them in. And so he's sitting at his table and he's been drinking. And I always find it interesting that she doesn't shy away from adults who drink in this series. I mean, not that it's like, I guess because it's just a thing that's like common enough in general. Because we get it later with Trelawney, but of course by the time we get it with her, like everybody's a little bit older. Like this is their third year, and it wouldn't shock me. I can't remember now, but if we even saw that Hagrid drank, yeah, because the whole talk about him and being in the pub and getting fluffy, and then the dragon egg, and that's in the first book. So yeah, so it's like kind of like if you're like paying attention really or thinking about it, and I can't say that I've always thought about it myself, but we kind of like see like that Hagrid like is somebody who suffers from anxiety and even a bit of depression in a way, and like he uses alcohol as sort of a medication, self-medication sort of thing. I mean, he drinks too just to have fun. Like it's just like it's that, but it also is kind of, I mean, he drinks like, I think it's almost to like sort of like come across in the way that like the dwarves come across in Lord of the Rings or something, like hardy and like, almost like a Tormund Giantsbane kind of like, give me a big tankard, and drink a bunch of beer or ale or whatever, Anyway, so Hagrid's got a big tankard in front of him right now that's like as big as a bucket, and he's having a little bit of trouble focusing. So he's obviously like, he's a few beers in. And Hagrid's already like counted his chickens in the sense that he thinks he's going to get fired, even though nothing's actually happened yet. And they're like, you haven't been. And he's like, not yet. But in his mind, it's only a matter of time because Malfoy and of course, he knows that Draco's playing it up, and he also knows that at this point Lucius Malfoy is a governor of the Wait. No. He's not a governor anymore. That he got sacked as a governor at the end of Chamber of Secrets. That's right. But still, he has influence with the ministry and just with like with people in general. He's got money, so he's got influence. So. Anyway, and so they're like, man, he's faking it. And so Hagrid mentions that the school governors have been told, and they reckon he started too big, and that's, I mean, admittedly, it's true he shouldn't have started with hippogriffs, but the way he taught the lesson, if you paid attention, but of course, the counter argument to that would be that, well, with students this age, it's very likely that some of them won't be paying attention, and it's too dangerous of a thing to. But then again, like the counter argument to that is it's a magic school, so like a cut isn't really that big of a deal when somebody can wave their wand who's an expert like Madame Pomfrey and heal them up in like a fucking second. So whatever. So yes, he started too big, but it's still on Malfoy. So Hagrid's blaming himself because that's what happens when anything goes wrong with regards to him, or even anything that he perceives that's related to him. And Hermione's like, it's Malfoy's fault, not yours. And they're like, we'll stick up for you. We'll tell them what really happened. We'll be witnesses for you. Don't worry. We'll back you up. It's going to be cool. Blah, blah, blah. And Hagrid's like, oh, and so he's crying, and all that good stuff. And and Hermione is like, think you've had a bit too much to drink. You've had enough, Hagrid. And she actually like just grabs his fucking tankard and just takes it outside and dumps it. Like, I don't know, Hermione. Like, usually taking alcohol from a drunk person can be dangerous, but that's the thing about Hagrid. He's rarely dangerous to people that he cares about. He can mildly hurt them, but like just from like a hug that's too hard or a pat on the back that's too hard, which most of his are. But other than that, he's not really. He only lashes out at people that he actually has disdain for. And usually if they do something specific to provoke it. Anyway, Hagrid's like, yeah, maybe she's right. So he goes outside too and sticks his head in a water barrel, which apparently like does actually in his case help him kind of come back to a slightly more sober state. And just as he's coming back to a sober state and being like, all right, well, it's nice that you came. What do you think you're doing? And he just like kind of freaks out. And once it's like he sees Harry and like realizes all of a sudden that he's out after dark, and he basically just starts yelling at him about that, and yells at Hermione and Ron for letting him out. And so he comes to the door and like grabs Harry and like walks them back up to the school, and he's like, I'm taking you back up there, and don't let me catch you walking down here to see me after dark again. And he says, I'm not worth that. Which, again, gives us insight into how Hagrid sees himself, and it's unfortunate. And that goes, again, back to what I continually say about Hagrid, is that it's fucked up that they never gave him a wand again officially, and never gave him the ability to finish his education. Even if he was technically only cleared in the previous year before this chapter, it's still just like, it's not cool. Anyway, that is how the chapter ends. So as I say, there's a lot that's sort of set up for things that are coming. Some that we've already mentioned, some that we may. Let's have a look at our YouTube comments. We've got a few. A bunch of them on the last video specifically. Let's see if we can get to all of those. Let's see here. In reference to me mentioning about like things that are brought up in earlier books and then like name dropped or whatever, and then like used later. Judy Rose mentioned that. Judy's Rose. I just now realized that that's plural. I'm sorry that this whole time I've been saying that wrong. Anyway, mentioned that Sirius is name dropped in the first book, as is the motorbike, or motorcycle, as we would say in America, in the first book, and then of course, obviously, he comes up again in this one, and a couple more. Sarah Meads provided me with some extra trivia to say that Crookshanks is, well, as described in the book, as being bandy-legged, and that the Scottish name Cruikshanks, without an S there, Cruikshank, refers to someone with bowed or bent cruick legs, shanks. So the name Crookshanks is essentially bandy-legged. All right, so about Harry not seeing the Thestrals. I see Di replied. And that's pretty much, it's the way that Rowling has explained it is, it's not so much just that Harry doesn't remember, it's that Harry hadn't processed. He was too young to understand what was happening, so it doesn't count in that regard. Apparently, and that's, if we're gonna go ahead and go there with that, we'll go ahead and mention when things happen the way they do. After Cedric, at the end of 4, you might think, well, what about the carriage is taking him at the end of the school year back to the train then. And there's the argument apparently still that, like, it's not until Harry goes home and, like, you know, spends a few weeks away from Hogwarts, or a couple of months, that he processes the death of Cedric Diggory. And then, like, when he comes back, that's when he sees them for the first time. So yeah, Hairless Oyster had a computer question. This is 3 days ago, so I don't really know if you ever solved this problem, and this is completely irrelevant, but it's okay. Let's see what we're talking about. I don't know that it's actually a real question. I would think that a USB keyboard would work. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not going to get into the whole question. There's the answer that I think. And I mentioned it earlier that Isaac said that theory that Dementors are just emo White Walkers, which is pretty funny. But I don't know what, you know. They're like Wraith Walkers. There's something. Wow, we get deep into the trivia here. Diana also mentioned something about one of the movies, and she's right, it's in this movie. There's a scene in the Leaky Cauldron where the camera passes somebody magically stirring their coffee while reading a Stephen Hawking book, A Brief History in Time. Apparently that is in this one. And Cardinal Doomsday goes on to provide us with an additional bit of trivia that is Ian Brown from the band The Stone Roses. That... did not know that. So, alright, so those are all those. I feel like, was there any more? Let's see. Hang on. On the Night Bus episode, Cardinal Doomsday asked, oh wow, there's a lot here. Why didn't Ron hail the night bus in book 2? Where in book 2? Where? I hate to have to go back and forth, but I'm like, wait a minute. Why didn't Ron hail the night bus in book 2? What part of book 2 are you talking about? I'm trying to think back. I'm in 2 different books right now, and neither one of them are 2. 3 and 6. I know we just did 2, but it wasn't just yesterday, so I'm like, it's not. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, and I saw the part, and Cardinal Doomsday also mentions that Harry's trunk does have wheels in the movie. I saw that too in the night bus segment. But I did that after. I made that screenshot after I did the episode, so I didn't watch that till after. Yeah, and then also, so there's a few things here. This is a loaded comment from Cardinal Doomsday here. The opinion expressed that Sirius was just getting a look at Harry. I think that's entirely plausible too. It's just that the night bus shows up right after, so we don't really get a chance to, we don't get a chance to really find out. Stan Shunpike was a Cockney, and that's the accent that Stephen Fry uses, right, for him, I think. I mean, because the dialogue is written in such a way to sort of force your pronunciation. And apparently Ernie Prang, apparently Prang is English slang for automobile crash, so That's pretty funny. Also, yeah, there's a thing that happens in the movie that doesn't happen in the book. There's like this shrunken head that like talks in like a Jamaican accent. I don't know. There's like some whole weird thing going on there. Yes, yes, yes. Azkaban guards. Hey, whatever. I feel how I feel. The accident. Da, 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 da. I agree. Sorry, I'm like not saying all the stuff. I'm just trying to make sure I see everything. Yes, I think that the Dursleys should have had their memory wiped about Aunt Marge being blown up. Um, okay. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, here we go. Let's make sure that I've got everything. I just don't want to leave anybody out. Um, mm, mm, mm. Oh yeah, and Ron Weasley is not the seventh. Ginny is. Ron is the sixth son and sixth child. Ginny is the seventh child. Um, I think that covers all of your comments. It would appear so anyway. Okay, cool. I believe that's it. And what do we got? Ah, yes. Okay, well, we'll get there when we get there. Yes, that is everything. Thank you, as always, for listening. I want to hear everything you got to say, so give me them comments and all that stuff, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day part. Peace.